Joining us in the show right now, award-winning writer Mandy Hager. Mandy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Talk about awards, mate. I was having a look at your bio, traveling to France and spending time there on the Catherine Mansfield Fellowship, and there's some pretty good awards in there. It's not just like little old radio awards like some of us, but it's like big time, real big time.
It's been very nice, yeah.
I feel like
over 30 years, though, remember.
We often say, Mandy, we like being the dumbest people in the room, and this kind of feels like one of those moments. And the thought that came to mind was this one from Wayne's World.
We're not worthy. We're not worthy.
I thought that felt a bit appropriate. But hey, look, thank you for joining us. The reason I've asked you specifically to join us is you and I have had an interaction about this topic, and I'm more than happy to talk about that and get your views on that. And you can tell us what you think we got right or got wrong. It's all open for conversation. But a few weeks ago, we wanted to talk about anti-Semitism, and especially within the realm of the whole Bradley Cooper Jew face controversy. So we went to a synagogue because we kind of believe if we're not representative of the people, we should get the people who are affected by this and get them on board. The synagogue gave us to a spokesperson. The spokesperson was from the Jewish Council. That happened to be a woman called Juliet Moses, who some people have some pretty strong opinions about some of her views of gender and women and that sort of thing. Now, we were talking to her about anti-Semitism and Jew face. That was our path. But we got quite a bit of kickback from some people, which we didn't actually participate in. Like I don't tend to feed the trolls, but we got a big bit of pushback. And you contacted us and you said some things, and I contacted you privately and said thank you so much. And this is what I said to you in the private chat, just so everyone is caught up with us. I said, for people who create content, it's quite difficult. So let's say you're looking for a conversation around neurology, and the top qualified neurologist in the country happens to think co-governance is a pile of crap. Do you get that top neuroscientist, that top neurologist on to talk about neuroscience, or if they're the best person to talk about it, or do you not because they've got views in another area? And that's sort of what we talked about briefly in private. And we want to kind of talk about that again today in general, because I think a lot of people want to know about this conversation as well. People say things like, oh, I can't say anything online, I'll get cancelled. It's like, well, why don't we figure it out if we can? Who's a platform? What can and can't be said? How it can be approached? And that's sort of the summary of this whole conversation. So, we can wrap this up in about 90 seconds, I think. Mandy, it should be an easy one. But if I just throw you the ball with that background and that idea, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Super easy question. It's all about context, really. So, of course, you should be able to ask anybody on, and anybody is entitled to an opinion. I guess if we're talking about the neurologist, if you get a neurologist on and you're asking him technical details about his specialty, that's cool. But then if you're asking him questions about sort of access to medicine or something that's more affected by his personal values, then his beliefs start to impact that. And when I was thinking about this, I was thinking of something I heard on the radio the other day that infuriates me every time, that you hear an economist talking about something, and then at the end, they just quickly say that this was a person from the New Zealand Initiative. Now that's it's a think tank lobby group, but that's not actually mentioned. And so I think this is why people are getting so hot under the collar, because we've got an awful lot of people who are being put out as commentators, but they're coming with a kind of point of view that they're pushing, and it's not being stated up front. And so that's the thing, I think. So in that case with Juliet, then she probably answered, I didn't listen to it, she probably answered perfectly reasonably about the topic that you had, but it's about if that swerves off in another direction, that might have taken you into a place that made you uncomfortable, and certainly would have made a lot of other people uncomfortable. And I guess it's about particularly people who say they're representing a whole group. Posey Parker would say she's representing women.
Yeah, sure.
A whole lot of us would say that is not the case. So I think that's the kind of subtlety of it. So it's not about stopping people talking. It's about people being upfront about who they are and where they're coming from, so that we then have the right to make a decision about whether we trust what they're saying or not.
Chewy?
Yeah, I mean, I've had some pretty interesting discussions today. I mean, being someone that's involved in this sort of news, current affairs, commentary, and that sort of thing, I almost feel that some people consider platforming to be, no matter what their views are, why you want to talk to them. So if we take our previous guest as an example, we wanted to talk about a very specific thing, and it turned out that two of her other areas of commentary and areas of pushback from some people almost ruled out whatever opinions she had on this thing that we were asking her about. So yeah, it's like our fictional neurologist, you know, nothing he says has any any weight or validity because he doesn't like co-governance. And I guess I think that there's potentially a little bit more nuance in the word platforming. I've been very critical of it in the past, especially with mainstream news. We've brought someone on for the show for an opinion, we give them 10 minutes and there's no critical discussion. It's just they hit their bullet points and they're gone. Whereas what we do is a lot more in depth and a lot more critical, and we can add a lot more, as you said, context to it. And I think in some cases really hold people's feet to the fire, or even in some cases for utter ridicule for their points of view. But then, we get this pushback that says, no, you shouldn't talk to this person at all. You shouldn't share any of their views. You shouldn't open them up to any audience, even if they have a bigger audience than we have.
Give them credibility.
A minefield.
That's what people say. That if you put them on, no matter what for, it gives them credibility. That's the criticisms.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that, and I overall I don't agree. I think possibly, if Adolf Hitler was still around and you invited him on the show, I would think that was pretty dodgy. But overall, people are entitled to their opinions. But I think personally, ethical journalism is allowing that person to speak, but then also giving the context around them so that people understand where they're coming from. And I do this, my last two books were nonfiction books for secondary school, and they were looking at the history of different protests and how they've shaped the country. And because we're sort of in this post-truth world where, everybody gets funny about things, the first thing I did in the introduction was say, look, this is the lens through which I view this. These are all facts, but you have to remember that every time you receive a fact, it is coming through the lens of my brain. I've curated those facts, and somebody with a different point of view and with different values will pick a whole different group of facts to bring to the fore. And so I think it's really important that we pull away from this kind of saying good or bad and actually say, these are my values. This is where I'm coming from. You don't have to agree with them. I'm giving a point of view. What are yours? And let's have a discussion. So, I mean, that's how you would hope it would be. But it seems to me that at the moment, in our media at the moment, we don't have that. We just have we have these real divisions and this real anger, and it's really worrying and it's really dangerous. But I think a lot of it's been manufactured because while we're all divided, we're not watching what's going on.
The credibility thing, if you give them any ear, it gives them credibility. The difficulty I have as a content producer and someone who manufactures a show is I look around and I see, Paula Penfold making Fire and Fury, great documentary, but that platformed a whole bunch of people. Byron Clark, friend of the show, wrote his book, whole bunch of critiquing there. But if we're just saying, if you just basically mention their name or give them part of your work, you're platforming them, then, Calvin Morgan, his Twitter feed is amazing. And he literally just takes content and reposts it. So if that's the yardstick, if platforming them gives credibility, that also means by definition that there's some gatekeepers that go, those group of people, Paula Penfold, she can do it. She's allowed to platform them. But those group of people, they can't do it. And I don't, that's what I struggle with. Because it's either like anybody platforming them gives them credibility, no, or nobody platforming them. But there seems to be a conversation at the moment in this sphere where there are some gatekeepers, anonymous, nameless, whatever, who have an almost like an elite group that are allowed to do it, and everyone else is not. And I'm really confused about that, because as much of a troublemaker as I can be, I'm kind of a rule follower. And I'm like, look, just give me the rules. I'll play by the rules. I'm happy to. But when the rules are different for every person, it's like, what am I fucking supposed to do?
I don't have an answer. Just be real and about it. I do really think that in a way, we've been backed into this corner where we keep getting presented with stuff and there's no nuanced debate around it. And I think that's the issue, is that and people are just fed up with it. And so we've just gone into these little silos because I've stopped watching any TV news because my blood pressure just goes through the roof because people say stuff and nothing is followed up. And so that's what I think's happened, is that we've been kind of forced into this fury at each other where we're just talking past each other and not listening. But I think what you guys are doing is great, because you do kind of discuss it and do it. So yes, I contacted you and said, were you aware this person had other sides to them? But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be talking to her. It's just so that you, as the presenter, are aware of that, so that if you slip some of those other conversations, you would have the context around it.
And look, I think, and like I said, I responded to you. What you did was perfect, and I didn't have all the information then. But then there's another way of doing it, which is like, look at these fuckwits, and it's like, okay, well, that may not be the best way to get us to understand the perspective. Now, I know what's actually going to happen from this conversation. If some people see it or some group see it, they're going to be like, oh, look at these liberal tears, these privileged men, and da-da-da-da-da. It's like, no, actually, I think this is a conversation that lots of people don't get or are too afraid to have. And those of us who aren't in the big high profile waka going out there fighting the fight, we're in the back room sort of just doing a little bit helping. We want to support those big boats. But when the big boats are sending us mixed messages, we're a bit lost as to how to do that and what to do it from time to time. Unless you're like us, Mandy, and you've realized your lane and you're like, fuck it, we'll just do what we want, which is pretty much what we're doing now anyway. We're confident in our lane, not to be arrogant, saying we don't care, because look, we're talking to you based around a concern you had. That's the main driver. But like, we know our lane and we know our audience, and our audience knows us. So we're just going to keep being us and look for input from people like you when, I'm not saying we got it wrong with that, but when a potential issue may come up, then we listen.
Yeah, and look, I think that's all you can do. If I look at, my brother Nicky's career, if he worried about, what was said about him, he would have given up years and years ago. But you just have to do what you feel strongly is the right thing to do, and then just quietly go away and do it. And we all kind of approach it differently. I do it through writing novels or other, writing for kids. He does his thing, you do your thing. And, to me, all that matters is what is the heart of this person and what is their intention. And if the intention is a good one, then I'm fine with it.
Love that. Chewy, anything to wrap up?
Thank you very much. When we refer back to this interview that said everybody off, we had your message and we had all of these angry people, and I reached out to a few of my friends and I say, hey, we're getting some really weird pushback on this person. You're involved in this community, but what can you tell me about them? And it was, she is dreadful. and here's 4 or 5 other people you could ask for the same thing. And I mean, that is also really helpful. Hey, guys, here's some better people that you could talk to for what we do is enormously helpful. But at the end of the day, we're just trying to do our best, and I think a lot of people are. And a pitchfork-wielding mob is not going to advance your cause. It's not going to build your tribe. And it's potentially going to do damage to the message. And I just wish people could see through that. It's right to be angry, but focus it.
Yeah. But we're not given much opportunity to know how to do that anymore. I mean,
no.
and social media has distanced us from the actual people speaking. So it's very easy to be rude and aggressive and combative when you're not face to face talking with someone, and you're probably not even talking to somebody whose name you know, because most people aren't brave enough to even put their names out there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it's turned us all into the mean kids a bit, because we can hide behind that. So it is really hard. But again, you know, the fact that you're talking about it and making an effort, and you might get somebody on. Anybody's capable of getting somebody on who then potentially might, look at all those ACT candidates that have just been discovered to have all this stuff in their past. They looked okay to somebody at some point. But the point is to say, actually, we found somebody that might have a better opinion on this, and from now on we're going to use them rather than just continuing. How long did we have Matthew Hooton on national radio giving opinions before they finally realised that he was a lobbyist and that wasn't appropriate? It was years and years and years.
Yeah, absolutely.
And look, thank you for your time, Mandy. I'll just say this thing, because I only thought this afternoon, is like, for the people who think just giving someone a platform, and I don't typically label people unless they're like, I don't use the word Nazi very much about people unless they're like those guys protesting at Posey Park, or not protesting, they were there attending, who were actual Nazis who saluted and had the flags and everything. I'll call them Nazis. I kind of feel a bit the same about the word turf, but then that's not my community, so I'm not going to judge people who use it. But David Seymour, for example, could well be our Deputy Prime Minister next year. Yeah, there's a good chance of that. There are many in the community who call him a turf. So does that mean for people who think you don't platform turfs because it gives them credibility, they would be saying that no left-wing progressive group should have the Deputy Prime Minister on next year to have a crack at him about his topics? That's how it kind of flows down if you take that position. And I'm like, no, I can't do that, sorry.
No, that's mad. And in fact, what they should be doing is having him on and challenging him on it.
Yeah. If people want to find out more about you, Mandy, your website is mandyhager.com. And I love this bit. Mandy Hager is a multi-award-winning author, writer with a passion to promote the politics of love. I feel loved tonight. I feel like that's been a part of our conversation, Mandy.
Well,
thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. And keep doing what you're doing.
Mandy.
I really appreciate it.